game, and I know what kinds of decks I like to play. I know the different kinds of decks conceptually that exist, but I'm not someone who's super familiar with all the different deck builds. I don't have every archetype memorized. I don't keep great attention to things like ban lists, and I think it would be a good thing to exist for people who are sort of where I am and sort of where I've been, trying to get started and trying to look at this content and be like, okay, what's going on? Because a lot of YouTubers and a lot of content creators in general talk about these things, and they talk about them in a more advanced language, and they talk about them in a much more upbeat and generally faster tone, which is great for those who are trying to stay up to date with current material. But for those who are trying to get caught up, I think it's a good idea to slow down and sort of just look and talk at what we've got going on. So, in order to do that, I'm going to have to explain the rules, obviously. We'll talk about how you win, or the specifics of how certain things work in a minute. But for now, I'm going to go through and build a very basic deck. So in this case, what's a good card to start with? We'll go with an Elemental Hero deck. Let's grab a copy of Elemental Hero, Avian, and Burstanatrix, and that way I can explain some things real quick. And maybe a copy of Bubble Man, because that lets us talk about some things I want to talk about pretty immediately. So, this is what a normal monster card looks like. There's a lot of information on this card, so we're going to take it step by step. First things first, we have the card's name at the top. In this case, this is Elemental Hero Avian. This is Elemental Hero Burstanatrix. This is Elemental Hero Bubble Man. And I think we'll grab some others when I get around to actually building this very simple deck. So that's their level. Anything that has this is their level. That's their name. Their level is the number of little stars that you see at the top. We'll get around to how summoning works in a minute, but the first immediate thing you need to know is that monsters with 4 stars or less can be summoned straight out of your hand. Monsters with 5 stars, or monsters with 5 or 6 stars require what's called a tribute summon, which I'll show you later, where you tribute one monster that you control, and then you get to normal summon that monster. Anything, I think it's level 7 or higher, requires 2 tributes. There are certain cards with effects that require different things, but we'll get into that towards the last bit of the video when I actually go through what a turn might look like. The next thing you'll notice, since we're at the top, is the attribute. Here we can see Elemental Hero Avian is a wind monster. Burstanatrix is fire. Bubble Man is water. That sort of aligns. It's a little hard to explain. It's one of two things that bind cards together conceptually. You'll have certain cards that will have effects that only target, not even target, that's a specific term, that only affect wind monsters or fire or water or earth or what have you. And then moving on from attribute is a card's type. Type is a different thing that tends to be a little more specific. So if you notice, these three all have different attributes, but they all have the same type. They're all warrior monsters. Type is another one of those, I guess, just sort of tags that a monster can have, where it's, oh, here's a spell that affects warrior monsters, here's this guy that does this if you're a plant, so on and so forth. And again, we'll look at how that works in a bit. The next piece of card anatomy because that's what we're doing as our stats. Down here you can see that Elemental Hero Avion has 1,000 attack and 1,000 defense. Excuse me. Burstanatrix, it's a little bit different. Bubbleman, a little bit different still. And that comes in when we get into our gameplay. Essentially, if you've never seen Yu-Gi-Oh before in your life, and somehow this has come up in your YouTube feed or what have you, both players start with 8,000 of what we call life points. And as you play the game, the goal is to reduce your opponent's life points down to 0. The main way you do that is by attacking them with your monsters. So when you're there are two positions, and again, I'll get into this later, but essentially what you need to know is that when a monster, both of these stats aren't usually relevant at the same time. There are a few exceptions with a few card effects that we'll get into way later in this series, probably. I don't think anything like that comes up now. But Avion, for example, if it's attacking, its sort of measure of power is 1,000. Burstanatrix, Avion, if it's defending, it's also going to be 1,000. So what that means is, when an attacking card attacks another, or if two cards battle and they're in attack position, the person who has the higher attack survives that fight, and then the person who controls the loser takes the difference in damage. So if Avion was in attack position, Burstanatrix was in attack position, and they fought, whoever controlled Avion would have to send Avion to the graveyard and then take 200 damage because there's a difference there. Let's say, for example, Burstanatrix is in attack position and Avion is in defense position. The point of defense position a lot of times can be to sort of mitigate your losses. So you would still lose Avion as a card because Burstanatrix's attack is higher than Avion's defense, but then you wouldn't take the damage. Now, the third thing to notice with these stats is over here with Bubbleman. He only has 800 attack, but he has 1,200 defense. So if Burstanatrix in attack position was to attack Bubbleman in defense position, their attack and defense are equal, and so nothing would happen there. If Avion, who only has 1,000 attack, was to attack Bubbleman, who has 1,200 defense, Avion would survive, but Avion's controller would take 200. And then, of course, if, let's say, for whatever reason, Burstanatrix was in defense position and Avion managed to attack, Burstanatrix would be destroyed because Burstanatrix only has 800 attack. Avion has, or 800 defense, I'm sorry. Avion has 1,000 attack, then there's a difference there. But the key point is that when you're in attack position, your card's power comes from their attack stat. In defense position, your card's power comes from its defense stat. And when a card is destroyed in defense position, unless there is a specific thing going on that we will explain when we get to it, the controller of the defense position monster is not going to take damage. That was a little bit of a tangent that I didn't quite mean to go on there, but that's, I can't really explain attack and defense without explaining what they do. And then finally, you have the card's text. Burstanatrix and Avion are both normal monsters, so their text is just some flavor stuff talking about how they, as superheroes, use their superpowers. But Bubbleman is an effect monster, which we can see right there, and you'll also notice that Bubbleman's outline is a little darker. It has an effect. An effect monster is simply a monster, as you can see, who has an effect. It does something other than attacking. It can still attack. Nothing stops it from attacking by inherently being an effect monster. There may be some caveats there, but the effect is just an extra thing it does. So in Bubbleman's sense, if this is the only card in your hand, you can special summon it from your hand. And then when it's summoned, you can draw 2 cards. So when we talked about the fact that because these guys are less than level 4 or lower, we can normal summon them, you only get 1 normal summon per turn. Your tribute summon counts as a normal summon, but you can special summon as many times as you want. So, for for example, say I have a card that's let me go back. Let me go Cyber Dragon as a example. Cyber Dragon, if only your opponent controls a monster, you can special summon Cyber Dragon, and you'll notice Cyber Dragon's level 5. But my point is, let's say you have something with a similar effect to this in your hand, you can special summon whatever other monster you want, or in this case, because Cyber Dragon requires you not to have anything else on the board, you could special summon Cyber Dragon and then normal summon something, and then do whatever you needed to do from there. But that's what a special summon is. You can do as many of them as you want, or as many of those as you want. I think that was grammar there. And that's what we need to understand there. The other thing you've probably noticed about Cyber Dragon compared to these three is that these three are all elemental hero monsters. And as you've seen when my cursor goes over here, and we look at the other list of monsters, we have things like Elemental Hero Core, Elemental Hero Blazeman, Elemental Hero Brave Neos. That Elemental Hero bit is what we call an archetype. Archetypes are a secret third thing. They're not an attribute, they're not a type. Archetypes, it's another tag, sort of. So you may have certain effects that are like, oh, equip this to an elemental hero monster, or to a dark magician monster. And not all archetypes are going to be the same type. For example, the generators. Dovelgus, the generator boss of iron, targets generators, but this is an earth machine. Frody is a generator, but it's a wind warrior, so on and so forth. And that, it's just a separate third tag that happens, and we'll look at what that involves. But I want to talk about some other things before we get too in-depth with that. But most decks are built around one archetype. Sometimes you can mix them and match them. So with that, we're going to start talking about spells. But before I do, there is one other kind of monster that I need to talk about that exists in the deck, and that's what's called a ritual monster. If you've seen the anime, you're probably familiar with Blackluster Soldier. Ritual monsters have this light blue background, and they are a kind of effect monster, sort of. They require ritual summoning, which is a kind of special summoning, using a specific kind of spell card. This is my, I'm realizing, relatively clunky segue into introducing spell cards. Blackluster Ritual is a spell card. It's a kind of spell card called a ritual spell. There are 5 kinds of... six kinds of ritual... no, 6 kinds of spells. There are ritual spells like this that let you tribute summon things. In this case, Blackluster Ritual, you would activate this spell by playing it, and we'll show what that looks like later. And then you tribute monsters from your hand or field whose total level is equal to 8 or more. There are some tribute monsters, or some ritual monsters that can use more than one ritual spell, like this guy over here. They have their other effects. There are some ritual spells that are sort of broad spectrum, applying to archetypes as a whole. There's a lot of variety that, again, not to like push everything down the line, but that's sort of out of the scope of this video. The important thing you need to know, that's what a ritual monster is, that's what a ritual spell is. There are decks that use them, although they aren't super popular, but they do exist. Other kinds of spell cards, let's look at Dark Hole. Dark Hole is a good spell card. Dark Hole is just a standard spell. On your turn, during your main phase, which we'll explain in a bit, you can play this card from your hand, or if you have it face down on your field, you can flip it face up, and then its effect activates. In this case, you would destroy everything. quick play spells. You mentioned you heard me mention that you can flip cards face up, and we'll get into what the spell and trap zones do visually in a minute. But for now, what you need to understand is that cards like this you can set face down. You can either play them on your turn, or you can put them face down in your spell or trap zone, and then later you can flip them face up to activate your effect. That's what we call setting a spell trap. That phrasing was a little clunky, I'm sorry. But that's what Dark Hole does. There's a term we use called board wiping. Quick play spells are a little bit different. I think Mystical Space Typhoon? Yeah, Mystical Space Typhoon is a quick play spell. So the thing about Mystical Space Typhoon is you could either play it on your turn, or if you wanted, as you can see, there's a little, almost like a lightning bolt thing up at the top. It's a little hard to see, but that indicates this is a quick play spell. And that means that you can also use it on your opponent's turn. Now, quick play spells, I believe, have to be set on your turn before they can be activated on your opponent's turn. Essentially, they work like normal spells, but they can also behave like traps, and we'll get into what that looks like. And this is also a good time to note that some monsters have quick play effects that if they're on the field, or there's some in your hand, actually, that we call hand traps, you can kind of envision why, that do that same sort of messing up the turn order. Next was the continuous spell. I have to think of a Swords of Revealing Light, I think, is a it is not. We'll go with Swords of Burning Light. So, as you can see, there's a little infinity symbol beside this one. The way this behaves is that you activate it like a spell on your turn, and usually when a spell is activated, it gets played to the spell and trap zone, and then once its effect resolves, it goes to the graveyard. Because this is a continuous spell, it skips that step of going to the graveyard. Instead, if you read its effect, this card would be destroyed either once you start to control a monster, or if your opponent has 5 or more cards in their hand. So, a lot of continuous spells are going to have effects like that. And that's always good to have. Field spells. Let's go with Sogen. Sogen's a good field spell. This one, it appears to have a sort of compass at the top, and that's how you know it's a field spell. This stays on the field like a continuous trap, but instead of staying in the spell and trap zone, there's a special field spell zone. And the thing about field spells is that oftentimes, at least in the early conceptions of the game, they affected both sides of the field. So in this case, all warrior and beast monsters on the field, both mine and my opponent's, would gain 200 attack and defense. These are similar to stadium cards in the Pokemon TCG, if you've ever played those. I'm curious about something. Fusion Gate. Fusion Gate. Yeah, this is a field spell that either player can use to fusion summon monsters. We'll get into fusion summoning once I've explained some other things. Field spells, equip spells was the last thing. Gravity Axe. This is an equip spell. Yeah, these have a sort of cross at the top there. And what these do is you play them in your spell and trap zone, and then you go, this effect, you equip it to a monster. You go, this effect applies to this monster. In this case, Gravity Axe Garl, or Grarl, I forgot there was a second R in there. This particular monster you choose gains 500 attack, and then just broad spectrum, your opponent cannot change their battle positions. So that's what an equip spell does. I figured it was good to go ahead and talk about the different kind of spells all at once, so we could talk about, that sort of behavior. all in one fell swoop. Traps, I think, are the last bit we want to talk about here. So, trap hole. Oh, there's lots of versions of trap hole. We'll use bottomless trap hole. Trap cards, as you can see, have this sort of purple color behind them. I guess more of like a magenta-ish, kind of? I'll call that magenta. These are cards that will be in your hand, but 9 times out of 10, unless there's some really quirky ones that I'm forgetting about, you're going to place these face down in your spell and trap zone, and then from there, you can you can't flip them face up to activate their effects as soon as it's your turn still. They become usable as soon as your turn ends and your opponent's turn starts. The turn you play them at. So, say turn 1, I set bottomless trap hole. At the start of my opponent's turn, this now is a valid card that I can activate. So there are lots of different kinds of these. Trap hole is a trap archetype. I hesitate to call it an archetype. There are a lot of cards that have sort of cousins that are very slightly. So your generic, where is just good old standard trap hole? I can't find. Oh, okay. So usual trap hole is just if my opponent normal summons or flip summons a monster with 1,000 or more attack, I can activate this card. Go, you've summoned a monster. Boom, trap hole. I destroy it. Bottomless trap hole is related. It forces the monster to be a little bit stronger, but then it can also be used against special summon monsters, which gets really helpful when we get into what our extra deck involves. So the next kind of trap card is what we call a counter trap. They're a little bit quirky. You may be thinking, but all of these are when something happens, blah, 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 blah. What's the difference? And there's a very thin difference. I think it has to do with a concept called spell speed that's a little more advanced, and we'll talk about it later. But what you need to know, essentially, is that counter traps are conditional. I may have a special guest come in at a later time, either in the video or in another video, to explain why they're so special, because I honestly don't use these all that often. I used them in Duel Links for a quest one time, and then I didn't bother with them ever again. So, but for an example of a trap that doesn't have like a when thing, because a lot of these are conditional anyway, if you look up here, like Acid Trap Hole, I just get to pick something, and I can do that on either turn. Continuous traps. Let's do, is it Call of the Haunted? Is that the one I want? Call of the Haunted. Similarly to a continuous spell, literally the same as a continuous spell, except it just works on the timing of traps, so you could activate it on your opponent's turn. In this case, Call of the Haunted, I would activate, and then I could pick something in my graveyard, bring it back, and then when either this card stays in my spell and trap zone, and then whatever monster stays alive, and then when either this card is destroyed by some other card effect, or when this guy is destroyed, the whole pair goes back to the grave. That's a continuous trap. They're the same as continuous spells, just they're traps. I think next on my list, we're going to circle back to the extra deck. So, you may have noticed I mentioned a thing called fusion summoning. Fusion summoning usually happens with a spell card called Polymerization, or one of its variants. Polymerization you activate as a normal spell card on your turn, and it allows you to fusion summon a fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as material. That sounds a little convoluted. What's fusion summoning? What do I do? So let's grab Flame Wingman. So this is Elemental Hero Flame Wingman. He's a fusion monster. He goes in our extra deck, and what happens is when we have Polymerization in our hand, and then, in this case, Avian and Burstanatrix either in our hand or on our field, I can play Poly as a spell, I get to send these two from wherever they are to the graveyard, and then I get to special summon Flame Wingman. A fusion summon is a kind of special summon. As you can see, the first line of text under the card's type and the fact that it's a fusion and the fact that it's an effect monster are the materials for that card. In this case, Flame Wingman requires Avian and Burstanatrix from wherever. There are other kinds of polymerization that let them be in different places. For example, there's some that are like, oh, you can pick anything on the field specifically for certain... honestly, that's kind of a way of nerfing certain things. There's one deck that I like to play where you summon this thing called the ABC Dragon Buster Cannon, or something like that. But the thing is, that doesn't use poly. I just have to have the 3 materials on the field, and then I just banish them, I think is what it is. But they can be either in the field or the graveyard. Therein lies the difference. But this guy, as you can see, like, they're strong. Your fusion monsters oftentimes are going to be your burst or your boss monsters, kind of. As you see, this guy's 2,500 attack. This guy is 21. This guy's at 21. Let me go ahead and grab a just a copy of Neos so you can look at what a boss monster that's not a fusion would be. This guy, you can see he's level 7, so I would have to have 2 things on the field and tribute them in order to summon him. So that's all well and good. That's how fusions work. That's how tributes exist. I think the next big piece is synchro summoning, which is similar to fusion summoning. Let's grab, I don't know, Junk Synchron and Junk Berserker. Maybe level 7? Yeah. So, synchro summoning is similar to fusion summoning. Synchro monsters have a white background. They're another kind of monster that is often a boss. The way they work is instead of polymerization, fusion summoning them, you have what's called a tuner monster. Junk Synchron, if you look, is a warrior and a tuner and an effect monster. Over here, their materials required are going to be where they were on a fusion monster. Junk Berserkers specify that Junk Synchron has to be the tuner. The tuner works the same way that polymerization does, in that it is the key component, and you usually only need 1. And the thing is, you just go, Junk Synchron and anything else, that's crazy. But their levels have to add up. So with this list of monsters, Junk Synchron and Elemental Hero Bubbleman would both have to be on the field. But then any point in either of my main phases, I could send those 2 to the graveyard and special summon Junk Berserker. And that's what those guys do. I think the next piece to talk about is an XZ's monster. These guys are a little funky. Cart, yep. XZ's. Let's grab a rank 3. Just a generic Batlin Boxer Cheat Commissioner. Sure. Ignore this guy's effect. This guy's an XZ's monster. They are black background. The way they work is they don't require... They're more similar to synchros than they are to fusion monsters in that the materials have to be on the board. But what they require generally is multiple monsters of the same level, and instead of going directly to the graveyard, they get not equipped, but attached to the XZ's monster as what we call material. Generally, if you're playing just on the table with your friends, you'll just kind of tuck these under your XZ's monster. And the majority of XZ's monsters have effects where they send material to the graveyard in order to trigger some effect. I think is Grenosaurus a good example? So in this case, yeah, Elemental Hero, Burstanatrix, and Avion probably would get equipped to Grenosaurus, and then when it destroys something by battle, send it to the graveyard. I can detach either one of these guys up here, send them to the graveyard, and then this guy just gets to deal an extra 1,000 damage. That's Xyz monsters. They're good and fun. I think the next thing to cover is links. I'm holding off on explaining one thing because they get really confusing really quickly. Let's go with just any generic link monster. I don't know. Let's grab. Can I just get a generic? Release date. So Decode Talker. We'll use Decode Talker as an example. Similarly to the other three, these guys have whatever material they require directly below their thing. These guys have arrows that you'll notice point. There are 2 zones above the monster zones that we'll call extra monster zones. When you play, you get to choose one of those, and then that becomes one of your monster zones for the time being. Although it's less of a choice, more so just whichever one's open. Link monsters, as the name might imply, link to one another. So Decode Talker requires 2 or more effect monsters. If you notice, he's a link 3, so he actually requires 3 monsters in total. So we would have to use Bubble Man and Junk Synchron and a 3rd effect monster, but we can... I don't have one grabbed into the deck immediately, but you know what a link monster, or an effect monster is now. What this guy does is he gains 500 attack for each monster he points to. As you can see, that's part of his effect. And so those red arrows are where he points. There's a combo, not to like spook anybody, but combos are a thing, where I get this guy called Power Code Talker. No, it's Transcode. Transcode Talker. Yeah. So Transcode Talker does this thing where if it's co-linked, so it points to something and something points back, they both gain 500, and then your opponent can't target them with whatever. And Transcode Talker can target a link 3 or lower in the graveyard and special summon it to a zone it points to. So the combo involves special summoning Transcode Talker, using, like, what you do somehow or another is you get Decode Talker, and then you tribute Decode Talker as part of whatever to special summon Transcode Talker, and then Transcode Talker uses its effect to bring back Decode Talker, so they point to each other and they do all their stuff, but you don't need to worry about that. What you need to know is effect monsters, or link monsters, have effects that regard the cards they point to. Okay. We can look what that looks like later, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. Link monsters are interesting. If you notice, they don't have a defense stat, they have a link rating. That's also what they have instead of a level. So, in this case, Decode Talker has a link 3. The link monsters get a little funny in their numbering, because you'll see their material cost up here, and then they have a link rating. The link rating, every non-link monster has what we call, or not what we call, effectively has a link rating of 1. So when you special summon a link monster, the materials link ratings have to add up. So I could take any 3 monsters that are effect monsters and special summon Transcode or Decode, but then also if I had just any generic monster and something that was a link 2, and let's say they're both effect monsters. Now, we have 2 or more effect monsters, and we have 1 monster and we have a link 2, that adds up to a link 3. Therefore, we can summon Transcode or Decode or Power Code, or I think Access Code is the 4th one, but that, again, doesn't matter. That's Link Monsters. They get a little funky. Link Monsters are, I think, the newest addition to the game. They are the ones that sort of fuel your combo engines, because it's really easy to, like, I tribute this guy to summon this guy, and then tribute this to summon this. Now that these guys in the grave, I can do ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. That's some scary, spooky stuff that we will get into later. I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole right now. What's next? Pendulums. Pendulums get freaky. Pendulums are weird. They are monsters that are also spells. You may be going, isn't that an effect monster? No, this guy is a pendulum and an effect monster and a spell. So what happens is you put pendulums, I kind of threw in here in the extra deck section of the video. Despite the fact that when you start the duel, they're not going to be in your extra deck. What happens is you play the pendulum like a spell. You put one on one far side of your spell trap zone. You put the other on the other side. So in this case, this guy is a pendulum rating. I think there's a different term of it. Of 1. This person has one of 8. And so what you do is you go, I'm going to put this guy on the left, this guy on the right, and then you can do what's called pendulum summoning, where you summon as many monsters from your hand or pendulum monsters in your extra deck between those two levels. So you can't summon level 1s, and you can't summon level 8, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's all valid. That comes straight out of your hand, straight onto the field. Or, if you have pendulum monsters in your extra deck, they come out too. You may be wondering, how in the heck do I get pendulum monsters in my extra deck? Well, that's the thing. If you have, let's say, these two on either side, and let's say Flash Knight, just to have one, Flash Knight's going to stay in our hand because it's a level 4. Right, so Stargazer Magician's on the left, Time Gazer Magician's on the right. I have Flash Knight in my hand, so I pendulum summon Flash Knight. Several turns later, Flash Knight, oops, it lost in a fight. It's going to go to the graveyard. So let's say Stargazer Magician's on the left, Time Gazer's on the right, Flash Knight's in the middle. We can special summon Flash Knight, it dies, but instead of going to the graveyard, pendulum monsters go to the extra deck, and then we can pendulum summon them later. And that's the cool thing about pendulum monsters. So now I will, once I wrap up this segment, we'll be right back in the battle simulator. So, this is an unscripted part of the video. The other bit was admittedly very loosely scripted, but let's talk about actually building a deck. I think that's an important thing to do. Granted, this is going to be something... These are rules we need to talk about. So we talked about the kinds of cards that you can put in a deck, spells, traps, monsters. We talked about the extra deck. So the structure of games generally are played in a best 2 out of 3 sort of situation most of the time. But what happens is between games, you have what's called a side deck, and those are basically cards you can swap out. So let's say you've got one strategy that's not working out too well, or you've got a card that's like, yeah, I'm doing a lot better with this than I thought I would, let me try adding this in to spice things up. You can put them in. It's similar to having players benched in a sport, where, I mean, hockey is a bad example, because everybody can kind of jump in and out whenever. But, you know, if you go, hey, I'm, you know, 4th quarter of this football game, my quarterback's injured, let me go swap in this guy, you know. I'm hoping I didn't accidentally butcher a bunch of sports terms. I am very much admittedly not a sports person. So yeah, let's build a deck. I think we're going to keep it really generic, just some good old dragon tomfoolery. So let's grab, I like Blue Eyes. Why can't I search Blue Eyes White Dragon? Hello? Monster card. Normal. There's Blue Eyes White Dragon. This is my favorite card art, because it's also the most common card art. We're going to grab some Alexandrite Dragons, because those guys I think are really fun, really cool. Let's grab, I don't know, Crawling Dragon number 2. Divine Dragon Ragnarok. Let's get some effect dragons in there. Some stuff we can normal summon. Um... We'll grab Blue Dragon Summoners. Let's go with some of these guys. That sounds fine. And then maybe some level 6-ish. Or some normal, just good old generic. We'll run Cursive Dragon. Maybe, I don't know, Meteor Dragon. Okay. Let's pick some generic spells. So let's go, I don't know, Mystical Space, Typhoon. Now, do I have to deselect? Oh, that was the issue. Mystical Space Typhoons. Let's get some Trap Holes. Or, not that one. Just generic. Let's see if we can run these guys. Maybe something like that. That seems good. I already have 2 of those. Okay. We'll go some of this. Grab a copy of Poly. We'll just grab 3 copies of Poly. Blue Eyes. Oh, there's a hyphen there. That's been the issue. Let's grab a couple different Blue Eyes fusion monsters. No, except not Blue Eyes Tyrant Dragon. We can't really summon that guy. Let's grab Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon, and let's grab... Oh, Azure Eyes. And that seems good. So let's save this deck. Okay, so that was a whole process to try and get this into this deck editor thing. And that was kind of a pain. So, oopsie daisy. Yugioh also is a little bit funky because I can't stop it whenever I want. But we're just going to grab a test hand. Make sure I'm recording. Yeah, I am recording. So as you saw, it was draw phase, standby phase, main phase 1. Draw phase, generally, at the start of your turn you would draw a card. That is the draw phase. The standby phase is a little weird. Nothing generally happens, but there are some cards that say during the standby phase do X, Y, or Z. I guess this is playing a copy of this deck as well. So that's how that would behave. Yeah. So, standby phase, certain things will happen depending on what you've got with your cards. But in main phase 1, which is what we're in now, this is when you would normal summon. So we have a couple of different cards we can normal summon. Protector with the Eyes of Blue. He's a spellcaster, he's a tuner. When he's normal summoned, I get to special summon another light tuner from my hand. Then I can target an effect monster, special summon a Blue Eyes from my hand. Now, this is what we call a combo. Let me show you. So what we get to do is I select a normal summon Protector with the Eyes of Blue. And then because he was normal summoned successfully, we can activate his effect to special summon Master with the Eyes of Blue. We'll put him in defense position just for the heck of it. Now, here's the thing. Protector with the Eyes of Blue lets me target an effect monster I control, send it to the graveyard, and special summon a Blue Eyes from hand. So our normal summon for the turn was Protector. Protector's only a level 1, so it's a valid normal summon. Master with the Eyes of Blue was special summoned, so its effect doesn't activate. Then I'm going to activate Protector with the Eyes of Blue's other effect to send this guy to the grave, which then lets me special summon Blue Eyes White Dragon on turn 1. So that's a special summon. Those are the power of effect monsters. They're really cool. Blue Eyes White Dragon. I'm going to go ahead and go through this combo because it's really fun. My extra deck are monsters that I can summon as soon as I meet the conditions. I don't have to worry about drawing them. That's a thing I think I forgot to mention. But we are going to special summon Azure Eyes Silver Dragon, using Protector as our tuner, Blue Eyes as our other. Now, Azure Eyes Silver Dragon is level 9, and so the 1 from Protector and the 8 from Blue Eyes added up for that. Now, we're still in our main phase 1. We're going to go to our battle phase. We can't attack, A, because Azure Eyes Silver Dragon is in defense position, so if something was to attack it, it would have to deal with its 3,000 defense instead of its 2,500 attack. We're going to enter main phase 2. This is where, say, for example, if I had a valid target for polymerization, I could fusion summon something. If I hadn't normal summoned yet, that would be a valid thing to do, so on and so forth. But there's nothing there to do, so we're going to end our turn. They're going to play... did they just pass turn? Alright. Oh, no, I guess we get to place both. So as you can see over here, they drew Trap Hole. They can set Trap Hole. In their case, I think... Oh, does Polymerization Blue Eyes Red Dragon plus... Oh, that is specific. I saw something in there that I forgot to add. So... In this case, let's see if we can demonstrate summoning Protector, using Protector to grab this guy, activate Protector, drop this guy for that in that position. And now, just so we can look at our other, let's special summon Blue Eye Spirit Dragon. Just for the heck of showing this off, Blue Eye Spirit Dragon has a slightly different effect that I want to look at and analyze. But I mean, this is what a turn might look like. Okay, and then because of whatever's in the graveyard, in this case, target a light tuner, add to your hand, shuffle this card, great. So what we can do then is shuffle that guy back in. We'll call it a special summon for this guy. Same position. So I mean that's a different way you could do that, because that was pointless. And actually, this kind of works to demonstrate why you need to be careful that just because you can do something in a duel doesn't mean you should. We'll get ahead of ourselves if I go too much into that, but sometimes you can kind of overextend the combo, and that causes problems. But as you can see, that was a synchro summon. You have a tuner and a non-tuner. They go together. That combo was weird. Just ignore it. I promise. It's fine. We're going to call that their end phase. They could have attacked us if they wanted to, but they didn't have anything to attack with. Because it's my standby phase, I get to use the effect of Azure Eyes Silver Dragon to special summon Blue Eyes White Dragon. I can't do anything with polymerization. We're going to set Trap Hole. I'm going to demonstrate some behavior, just so you can see how something here works, because I think it's good to see. We're going to go into our battle phase. Blue Eyes White Dragon is going to attack Azurai's Silver Dragon. Notice that nothing happened. That's because Azurai's defense is equal to Blue Eyes' attack. We're going to enter main phase 2. We're going to end turn. No, we'll skip. Just because I want to show what this can look like here. Battle phase. So, to demonstrate, Azurai's Silver Dragon, if it was to attack my Azurai's takes, or the player 2 takes 500 damage, because, Azurai's Silver Dragon, this one only has 2,500 attack, this one has 3,000 defense, the difference is 500, and that's taken by the person, controlling the attacker. Let's end their turn. Now, I've drawn this guy. I'm not going to worry about that. That sounds like something I don't want to do. So that's the other thing, is on your turn, during either of your main phases, you can change the battle position of your card. If it's an attack, you can put it in defense. If it's defense, you can put it in attack. The only exception to this is it cannot happen the turn the card is played. So I can't normal summon Sage and then immediately put it in defense position, nor could I set Cave Dragon and immediately flip it to attack position. Flip monsters. I completely forgot to talk about flip monsters. Flip monsters are a kind of effect monster who, because when you set a monster, they get played face down. And then they have an effect that activates when they're flipped face up into attack position, but you can't flip them into defense position. They have to be flipped into attack, and then if you want them in defense, you can do that next turn. But in our case, battle phase, just to explain some things, Blue Eyes White Dragon has 3,000 attack. It's an attack position. This Azure Eyes is an attack position. It only has 2,500. Because Azure Eyes Silver Dragon over here was in attack position when it was attacked, not only does my opponent take 500 damage, Azure Eyes is also destroyed. This one over here, now because there's nothing blocking me in terms of monsters, I get to attack directly for 2,500, and then I end my turn. Other person's turn, we're just going to end their turn for the sake of simplicity. Battle phase, just to wrap this up, because I think we've talked about what we needed to talk about. And if you notice, now that their life points are at 0, we win. Except I hit the wrong button. I'm not going to worry about that replay. So that's what a game might look like. Generally speaking, you and your opponent are not going to be playing the literal exact same deck in the literal exact same shuffling order with literally the exact same hands and preceding draws. But I hope that was at least a relatively concise explanation of... Not concise, that was nowhere near concise. I think this video is like an hour long at this point. But I hope that made sense. And if it didn't, I think there's a comment section. I don't remember if I have my socials linked on YouTube, but if I do, I hope there's a Discord thing there, and there should be a server, and in that server you should see me, and you can DM me if you want. I think my DMs are open, unless this goes crazy. If you're watching this years down the line, where for whatever reason there's like thousands of people involved, don't join the server, if there's a server. I don't know if there's a server. You should... I'll fix that later if there's not. But yeah, have a good one, I reckon.